Okay, since we have now our scene set up, let's see how it actually look like. I'm going to select my viewport and push 0 to access the render layer camera, and using my right mouse button and WASD, I am going to place myself pretty much at the location of my starting flag here. Now, if I hit the spacebar button, this is how basically my application will look like. There's obviously quite a few tweaks that have to be done. I'm going to get started by finishing up the irradiance cube map that I leave unfinished. I am also noticing that my little guy here is pretty shiny, so I'm going to tweak his material roughness and metallic value since we did not import the GLTF file. We're going to do that manually. So to start off, I'm going to go under properties and material. I am going to type CHAR to access my character material, and I'm going to focus on my irradiance cube map here. So I'm going to go under MicroLand environment and irradiance, and I'm going to fill in the blank. This is negative Y, this is positive X, this is positive Z, this is negative X, next in line is negative Z, and finish with positive finish that up with positive Y. And we are already seeing that there's a drastic change in our scene. So I'm going to zoom in on the little guy to have a better look at him. And I'm going to hit spacebar again. And I am going to go now under shader and user variable, and I'm going to manually tweak his roughness and metallic value. I'm going to put something like 0.625. And as metallic, I am going to go somewhere in this range, let's say 0.125. Okay, with that set, I am going to back off, zoom out a bit, hit my space bar again, and I'm going to focus on my skybox here. So I'm going to go here up and I'm going to type sky and access the MicroLand skybox. And for my skybox, I'm going to increase the strength. Let's put that at 2. And the blur, I'm going to go at somewhere like 3.725. So it's giving me a good overall smooth transition here. And next, I am going to change my sun intensity. So I'm going to go under outliner, select my sun properties and light source, and I'm going to tune that down to let's say 10. And now I'm going to fix my bloom that it's a bit too high. So I'm going to access the bloom material, properties and material. I'm going to go type bloom here to have access to the bloom. And let's have a look of what the bloom actually look like. So I'm going to go under renderer and I'm going to go on bloom and select my texture, and on the preview I'm going to drag that a bit, put that as a plane, and this is basically what my bloom texture look like. I am going to tweak that. The first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the max threshold, and the min threshold I'm going to go pull that to just keep the highlight of my skybox and those highly specular surfaces, which should be around here. So 3.375, let's say 3.375, and that should give us a good range to play with. So next thing, I'm going to change the overall result by tweaking the knobs. So I'm going to access the result material, and right off the bat I can see that my gamma is way too high. I'm going to tune that down and set that to somewhere like, let's say 2.4. For the exposure, keep that to 0, so like that I can have better shadow highlight here. And I think I'm going to leave the rest. Of course, there's a question of taste that comes into play here. That's pretty much the kind of image that I want to end up with. But you can tweak that however you like. I am now going to access the ambient occlusion material because I feel that the ambient occlusion is not, I want to have like some strong ambient occlusion highlights, especially like here or over there. I'm going to zoom in a bit to tweak that, and to have a better view, I'm going to hit space bar. I'm going to double click in an empty area to jump back straight at the top, and I'm going to type SSAO. And for I'm going to start by tweaking the power. I'm going to put the power way more high, and I'm going to reduce the kernel radius. Let's set that to 1. And I'm going to go closer actually to those flowers to have a better view at it. Something like that. I'm going to change the max distance to be reduced, as we can see here near the rock. I'm going to reduce that and put it as tight near the ground as possible. Let's put the value of 0.125, something like that. And kernel radius at 1. And the power, I am going to tweak that so I can start seeing around here. Let's turn it off a bit. And just like that, somewhere in this zone here. So I'm going to set it at 1 actually. And I still feel that it's not popping enough. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go under default encoding, and I'm simply going to double it right in the composite shader. So composite, shift and tab to access the vertex, the fragment shader, and multiply by AO. And let's see how that looks like. That is giving me basically what I wanted. I want to have a high ambient occlusion highlight here. Let's jump back to my default coding. And if I have a good overview, that is pretty much the image that I was looking for. And now let's fix those shadows that are way too blurry here. We're going to change the range we're set for the NRG sandbox, so we're going to change that. I am going to go on the outliner and select my first probe, access the probe properties, and I'm going to set that the zoom will be around 20. Right away I can see that it's way more sharp. And for the range, the clip start, clip end rate, I'm going to set -30 to 30 since our scene is not particularly on the z-axis, not particularly large. So I am now going to go under constraint, and I'm going to bring this probe way closer to my actual camera. I'm going to set a value of 5. Let's get closer a bit to see how it looks like. And now I start having this is where basically my first cascade end up. And I can see that I have basically good shadow here. I'm going to fix my second cascade here. So I'm going to go on outliner, select the second probe, access the probe property. And for this one, I'm going to set the zoom to be around 40. And I am going to set the clip start, clip end to be also -30 and 30. And I'm going to bring in that distance. So I'm going to set it at something like 20. And right away, I can see some relatively huge improvement. And I'm going to go on my last one, my last probe. And this time I'm going to put that the probe properties. The zoom will be at 60 and keep my -30 and 30. And for the distance, I am going to set that to 40. So I can see that here in the background, I have a relatively smooth shadow on top of my tip here, which give me good overall result. And that's basically it for our visual tweaks. If we see that there's something wrong later on, we can always go back and modify that. But so far, I am pretty satisfied with how the overall image look like. Since now our visual tweaks have been set up, let's proceed and start implementing our character controller. So I am going to select my viewport and click Shift and 2 to enter edit mode. And I am going under the outliner and I'm going to type CHAR to have access to my character controller and my character. With my character controller selected, I'm going to push dot to focus straight on him. And so far, the physics that we have been implementing is for the world, the collision itself, and the other obstacles that we have along the way. So this time we're going to focus more on the physics of our character. There's multiple ways we could have go about this. The way I choose for this specific tutorial is to simply use a capsule that we're going to move around space. So I'm going to select my character controller and I'm going to go under its physics property and I'm going to say add physics, rigid body, and I'm going to add a collider of the type capsule. And I am going to modify the height and the radius. Let's say that the height is going to be 0.6 and the radius will be 0.35. If we switch back to the view 3D and push 3 to have a side view, we can see that this encloses pretty much our little guy. I am going to give him a mass of about 25 kilo, and I am going to increase the gravity to have a specific gravity that is strictly applied on the character controller. And by default, our gravity is on the z-axis, of course, which is our up axis. It's of -9.81. I'm going to triple that. So I'm going to go and say minus 9.81 multiplied by 3 is going to be minus 29.43. And also, I don't want my capsule to bank when it reach, the ledge here or something like that. So I'm going to disable the angular factor. Our angular velocity will not have any impact on our capsule, and it will always stay straight up. And this is basically what we want to achieve. We also want to add a extra collision margin because our little guy is going to jump, and we want to reduce the penetration with the ground as much as possible. So let's add a collision margin of 0.2 here. And so that should give us great values to get started. Now, if I actually move using the manipulator, I move my capsule around, you can see that our little character is not following basically. So what we're going to do, we're going to select our character, and we're going to go under constraint, and we're going to add a constraint to copy the actual location of our character controller. So I'm going to say copy location, open that up. Target is going to be our character controller. Right away, I can see that it's centered here. So we are going to give it a little offset. So offset location, and I'm going to drag and holding shift, and it should be around this range to make sure that it's about minus 0.065, minus 0.065. And that should give us a great result. So when we select back the character controller here and we're moving him around, now our actual character is moving as well. If I select back my character, I'm going to also add another constraint to interpolate the rotation. We're going to be moving our little character. So if we got drastic movement from up to down or right to left, we don't want our character to just simply switch and shift from one direction to the other. So we're going to lerp its rotation using a quaternion interpolation. So it's going to be spherically interpolated, and it's going to move smoothly from right to left, up to down, and those drastic direction like that will be handled. So we're going to say lerp rotation, and we're going to give it an interpolation to get started with 10, which should give us great value. So now we basically have the physics for our character that is set up. Now we want also our camera to follow the character. So we are going to head over to the outliner, and we are going to select our geometry camera, and we are going to add to that geometry camera the properties, some constraint to basically follow our little guy in space. So I am going to create first a elliptic constraint with our geometry camera selected, of course. I am going to create a elliptic constraint, which is going to give me orbit functionality. And I'm going to say that the target will be my character. So whatever happened, my camera will follow my character. Now, if I select the viewport and push spacebar, I am going to modify those values, get started with something like minus 45. I'm going to tweak the distance to be around minus 5. And for the angle, I am going to say 180. And we got basically our little guy that is around here. Now we want to actually tell the camera to look at that guy. So we're going to say add constraint and track target. And for the target, we're going to specify that the target is our character. So like that, the camera, wherever the character go, the camera will be locked on our little guy. And the last thing that we want to do, we want to smoothly interpolate the location to make sure that the movements are going to be not too drastic. So we are going to go about that, and we're going to select that we are going to lerp the location. And for lerp location, we're going to say of 10. So it's going to be at 10 multiplied by the application delta time, which would give us a smooth interpolation. So now that we have that all set, we are going to be able to start coding.